Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Oh, welcome back to the Talkin Orioles baseball podcast. I'm your host, Benny Becker. Thrilled to be back with you folks today. And I have to just address, it's been about 2 weeks since our last episode, and I gotta say, I've been dying to get back in front of the camera and talk to you folks about the Orioles. It's been a long 2 weeks, gang. In some ways, it feels like it has been years on my life. Just to kind of fill you in and catch you up real quick, 2 weeks ago, I had an insanely jam-packed week, including 2 funerals, a wedding, a birthday, a 16-hour double, and since that 16-hour double, I've worked 6 other long, grueling shifts at my day job as a bartender. And that's no excuse as to why I am not here in front of you, gang, all the time, every day, every other day. Trust me when I say I want to be there. And after last week, I thought it was only going to be a week off, and then unfortunately, something happened in my life. Unfortunately, I had to put down my dog of 10 years. He was old. He lived a long, good life, but it was just hard. And listen, I might get emotional. I might get choked up a little. It's not easy for me to sit here and talk to you about it. I'm always going to be real with you. That's the reason why I'm doing this podcast and not one of the other podcasts or other works that I could be putting my time and effort into. I want to do this one, and I want to be here talking about this because it's just an authentic place for me. I am nothing if not an Orioles fan. I live and die with this team on a daily basis. And so I can authentically come here and care about the team nonstop and every single day be thinking about the Orioles and living on their good and bad. And unfortunately, last week, like I said, I had to put down my dog, and it was tough on me, gang. Like I said, he was older. I was mentally preparing myself for that day, but it really took a toll on me, and I love him, and I miss him dearly, and it's just upsetting. And so last week, I've tried to do this 22nd episode of the Talkin Orioles podcast multiple times over the last 2 weeks. And last week especially, I would be all ready. I would have everything written out. I would be in my jersey. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it, gang. And you see I'm getting choked up, and it's been a week, so I'm able to contain that somewhat, and I'm able to hold it in and move on with the show. But it was something I don't want to be in front of this camera if I'm not truly mentally in it, right? And as much as I wanted to do this, as much as this is a relief for me and something to take my mind off of it, sometimes you just need to give life some time, take a step back, give yourself a few extra days to heal and process and learn how to live your life without this dog that I've spent every day of the last 10 years with and has been with me through really tough times and really hard times and really good times too and fun times. And I'm going to miss all of them, truly. And I don't even know necessarily the point I'm trying to make at the moment. It's more just wearing my heart on my sleeve, gang, and coming to you and telling you that it's crushed me to be away for 2 weeks from this podcast. And I've wanted to come on every single one of those days that we haven't been on and catch you up and go into Orioles. And there's been a lot of great stuff to talk about. And heck, there's been some tough stuff to talk about too as far as the Orioles. And there's been big news. And we've been off the airs during that time. And I just want to say deep in my heart how much that hurt me and how much I wanted to be on here talking. And hopefully this is the only time ever moving forward that it's going to be this long in between us talking Orioles baseball. So I love him. Vito, I miss him. And it hurts and it's tough. But he's in a better place. It was in his best interest. it wasn't fair to put him through whatever testings and surgeries and anything else that may have prolonged his life, which would have been great. But ultimately, I just love and cherish the time I had with him. And I appreciate you letting me get that out and kind of understanding why I've been off the air for 2 weeks. And it hasn't just been me being lazy, and it hasn't just been me not wanting to talk Orioles, because certainly that's not the case. So with that, we're going to move forward. We do have a fantastic episode on our hands, gang. We have 15 games to catch you up on since the last time we were on here talking. Orioles did great in that time, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about where they kind of fall as far as standings go. Nothing but positive on that end. Talk about some players and fill you in. We're not going to talk about maybe individual at-bats, or we're not going to talk about even individual games necessarily like we do on most episodes. This is going to be kind of more broad scale because, again, we have 2 weeks and 2 pretty busy weeks as far as the Orioles go to catch you up on. So guys that we're going to be talking about is Gunnar Henderson, Kyle Bradish, John Means, Grayson Rodriguez, Tyler Wells, Austin Hayes, Jackson Holliday we haven't even talked about, gang. I literally can't even believe that we haven't even talked the Holliday getting sent down news yet, but we'll touch on that today. Some other young guys, Heston, McKenna, the ups and downs of Craig Kimbrel is something we are definitely going to talk about. Some other injury news like CNL Perez being back or Dylan Tate getting moved down, not because of an injury, just in general. Cowser and Westberg and kind of the bromance that they have created for themselves. Kind of take a look also at the big picture of this team as far as the rotation, the bullpen, the offense, kind of how they've performed so far. Also look at the schedule moving ahead because we're kind of at the end of that first chunk of schedule that I had talked about, the first 36 coming into the season. It's crazy to say, but we only have 2 games left until we've reached that first 36. So it's very exciting, but I do want to talk about not only what they've accomplished so far, but what we have ahead moving forward. Because when we looked at the schedule talk early in the season, it's funny, this was a stretch coming up that looked very tough, but who knows, maybe isn't as tough now. And then we also have some news about my guy, Nick Markakis, and that's very exciting. I think we'll end the episode with that Markakis news. You probably already heard it, but personally, him being one of my all-time favorite Orioles, that's certainly something I want to touch on. So let's just dig into it, gang. A lot to touch on, a lot to talk about. And we're going to start with those 15 games. Again, we're not going to break down every individual game. We're really just going to run through how they performed in the 15. And boy, was it exciting. They went 11-4 in those 15 games. About as good as you could ask. After dropping the first one in KC, they won the next 2. They went 2-1 in Los Angeles against the Angels. They had an unfortunate home series against the A's, weirdly, where they could have left with a 3-game sweep. Instead, they didn't even win the series, lost 2 of those 3 games, both on blown saves by Craig Kimbrel in games 1 and 3. Especially game 1 was very ugly, how it got out of control. Again, Kimbrel is something we will touch on more as it goes, because there's been ups and there's been downs, and I think we're starting to get the vibe of what Kimbrel's going to be for us, and we'll touch more on that. After, though, that tough series against Oakland, again, that's the type of series that disappointing for sure. Again, we could have won all 3 of those games, only win 1 of them, had the lead going into the 9th in, I believe, all 3 games in that series. And Oakland's not a good team. While they've been pesky and they've been better than people expected, and they've been winning more games. Heck, they've been hitting a lot of home runs too, surprisingly. It has not, or they are just not that good of a team. Like, even so, they still will not make the playoffs. They probably have no chance at the playoffs. And there's going to be a good 2-month stretch where they maybe only win 7 to 10 games in that 2-month stretch, I believe. And I truly do believe that. But they've been playing better, and that's the type of series, when it doesn't go your way, that, you know, you could come into that 4-game New York set being like, hey, let's just split. We're happy with a split. That's not what happened. The Orioles took the first two, could have won that third game, but lost. It was actually the first game all season the Orioles had been shut out. Still the only game the Orioles had been shut out this season. And that'll happen some days. But they had opportunities. I believe it was only a 2-0 loss to the Yankees that day. And ultimately, they could have found a way to not only put runs on the board, but win that game. And then in the fourth game, they come back and they win pretty dominant. And they really dominated that whole series. And it's kind of the tale of two teams, if you will, right? Because everyone right now is talking Yankees-Orioles. Oh, it's going to be a race at the top of that division. I don't necessarily see that being the case, okay? And I have thoroughly said that throughout this entire season, despite the fact that the Yankees have looked good. Because the Yankees look good some nights and look horrible other nights. And that's not one of the best teams in baseball. They're just not. Like, stop. They're not one of the best teams in baseball. And they might not be at full health right now. They don't have Garrett Cole. They don't have DJ LeMahieu. Yeah, but overall, that team is far less of a team than the Baltimore Orioles. Truly. Orioles are so much more superior of a team than the Yankees. And I think it's going to show throughout the season. And it's fantastic to get 3 of those first 4 games against the Yankees. Because remember, we only play 13 games now against division opponents. So only 9 games left. The Orioles have a 2-game lead over the Yankees. And maybe it is big. Maybe it's not big. Because I could see this team, the Orioles that being, easily winning 100 games. Easily. If not winning closer to 105, 110. I guess it wouldn't be 110. 110. Maybe not get 110, but like 17, 18. Okay. So that's where I think the Orioles are. And that's what I believed long before the season started. Meanwhile, the Yankees, they're a team that has already been shut out, I believe, 4, 5, 6 times this season. They're very inconsistent. Come and go. Sure, again, they're not at their full health. Aaron Judge has not been playing his best baseball by any means to start this season. But ultimately, gang, they are just not the level of team and the caliber of team the Orioles are. So, bit of a little tangent that we got off of that. Like I said, they win the series 3-1 against the Yankees. Absolutely loving it. And one last point is neither team really hit much that series. In fact, going into that 4th game, both teams had very poor batting averages in that series as a whole. The Orioles, though, just find a way to not only win the game, but do it in a way where they're getting out of jams when they need to. They're driving in runs when they're on the base paths. The Yankees just seem so inconsistent when it comes to all that, gang. And as a gambler, I weirdly wind up watching a decent amount of Yankee games. While I hate them, I wind up watching them because, I might have bet on a guy like Judge or Soto that day. And because of that, I can just tell you, I watch all of these Orioles games. I've watched a lot of Yankee games so far. The Yankees just aren't near the level of team the Orioles are. And I think that come All-Star break, and certainly at the end of the season, there's going to be at least a 4, 5, 6, 10-game gap between these Yankees and these Orioles. I'm telling you. I'm just telling you. I love it. So, the 15 games ended after that New York series with a 3-game sweep against the Reds in Cincinnati. And that's impressive because while the Reds are young and still up and coming and kind of around 500, give or take, they've got a lot of talent. Now, maybe, it's more Ellie De La Cruz and some nice pitchers, but the Orioles really dominated that Cincinnati series. And that's what you have to do against those middle to below level teams. That's how you win 100 games. You don't just beat the good teams in like the Yankees. You beat up on the bad teams. And yeah, that didn't happen in the Oakland series, but it happened in the KC series. It happened in the Angel series. We got the games back in the New York series, and then we took all 3 against Cincinnati, getting even more of them back. So 11-4 in those 15 games since the last time we've been on air. Overall, they're sitting at 23-11 coming into today. Now, if you've been watching this show frequently, you've heard me talk about the first 36 and going 24-12 in the first 36. That was a mark I set long ago when we had a yellow legal pad. Okay? Long ago, before the season even started, I believe. Or at the very least, no, it was before the season started for a fact, gang. I've been talking that 24-12 in the first 36. And how important that was because of kind of the poor opponents that we had, right? And we did face a lot of poor opponents. However, we talked, I believe, in last episode about how those, quote, poor opponents were actually playing better than we expected them to. The Angels started off the season definitely better than we expected them to. KC has absolutely been better than most people expected, even though I thought KC could take that next step. Definitely better. Pirates absolutely has been one of the surprise teams, if not the surprise team so far this season, and they have done very well for themselves also. Boston was looking better. Milwaukee has looked good. Minnesota has looked good. Again, KC, LA, Oakland. We know Oakland stinks, but again, Oakland's been playing better. The Yankees, we thought, hey, they're not going to be at their best when we face them early. Now, we took 3 of 4, but they still weren't at their best, even though they've been playing pretty good baseball. So they might have been playing better than personally I expected them to at this point, with them not being perfect. And then you got Cincinnati, who, again, I thought could be this decent team and wasn't around 500, but showing some promise, showing the talent that's all over that roster. I mean, that's kind of what we talked about. And then it finishes with these 2 games in Washington against the Nationals, right? The first 36. And we talked about how getting 24-12 would set the Orioles up for not only guaranteeing making the playoffs, but most likely winning the AL East, potentially being the best record in baseball, or best record in the AL, and setting the cornerstone to get 100 wins and the best record in baseball, which is all things that we talked about on this podcast before the season started as expectations, okay? Now, the first few, the playoffs, the AL East, these are things that you truly expected to a high degree. 100 wins, best record in baseball. Obviously, you have less of a conviction about those things happening and hitting. Ultimately, though, I've been over the moon with the Baltimore Orioles. And to see them be on the verge of getting to that 24-12, possibly even 25-11 in that first 36 is a beautiful thing. It's an absolutely beautiful thing because remember, the Orioles haven't played their best baseball yet, gang. If anything, they're just starting to kind of play their best baseball. Because that first month, at least that first 3/4 of April, wasn't the prettiest thing by any means. They were winning. They were winning games. They were winning series. They still refused to be swept. So we were seeing good things from the Orioles, but, there were plenty of guys that weren't playing up to their potential. The team just wasn't necessarily fully clicking as a whole, even though we were having positive moments. And now we're right there. We're on the doorstep of 24-12. If not 25-11, gang. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So before we continue on, I just want to take us back to when I was talking the schedule, right? And I broke the schedule down into 3 parts. First 36 games, the last 27 games, and then there was the middle 99, right? So I said that if the Orioles went 24-12 in the first 36, and they went 17-10 in the final 27, which is still very possible, because I want to take you through some of the teams that they're facing in that stretch. The Rockies, the White Sox, the Rays, the Red Sox, the Tigers, the Giants, I almost said the Niners, the Giants, the Tigers again, the Yankees, and then the Twins again. So not only are they division opponents that, or some of them are divisional opponents that we play very tough and very hard no matter how good they are playing, the rest of them is kind of a crappy stretch of teams. It looked like that before the season, and it looks like that again at this point in the season. Now, sure, you could say, oh, Detroit might be better than people believe, even though, as a gambler, people were high on Detroit, and I was less high on Detroit. And they've looked closer to what others believe they would be than I believe they would be. Let's not say that their season is set in stone yet. Truly. It could go one way. They could be sitting right around 90 wins when we face them in those two series. They could be right around 70 wins when we face them in those two series, right? San Francisco, though, has not looked great, and it's tough to think that that's going to really turn around. Minnesota, while they've looked all right, is another team that's certainly not set in stone, and things could go sour quick for them. Chicago's the worst team in the league, literally. Colorado's right above them as one of the worst teams in the league. And then again, you get the division opponents, Tampa, Boston, New York. Teams would play hard at any point in the season, no matter how good or bad those teams are. So if we get to that 17-10 in the final 27, and we have the 24-12, let's say, we split the Washington series, which I think is likely. Okay? That puts the Orioles with 41 wins, I believe, if my math is correct. 41 wins. That means that in the remaining 99 games, if they go 50-49, one game above 500 in the 99 games, we'll finish with 91 victories. Gang, this is what I talked about guaranteeing you make the playoffs off of that. Because let me tell you, these Orioles, especially with what they've shown me so far this season, is absolutely at the minimum a 50-49 team in those 99 games. Most likely they're 5, 10, 15 games better over that stretch, no matter how tough of a stretch they may be. Gang, this team has already pretty much guaranteed themselves 90-plus victories. And they look like a team that should wind up with 100-plus victories. So it's a beautiful thing to have talked about this in spring training and laid out this first 36 and what the Orioles need to accomplish and see them go out there and accomplish it. Sure, we're not quite there yet. Maybe, worst case, we get swept in this two-game set and we finish 23-13 because the Nationals, just like the A's, just like the Pirates, just like the Royals, are better than people maybe expected them to be this early in the season. And they're not a team that's just going to roll over and die for these Orioles. All I'm saying, though, is the Orioles coming into the year, I said, maybe was the best team in baseball and certainly the best team in the American League. And at this point, it's looking that way. So moving forward, the top of the AL East is where the Orioles sit at the moment. In fact, they were sitting that in the beginning of May before the three-game sweep against Cincinnati, right? So we're one up on the Yankees, at least 4.5 up on all the other teams. I think as much as 7.5, I believe, against Toronto, who's in that last spot. And this is what's going to occur. The Orioles, no matter how great everyone wants to talk, the AL East is so hard and so many good teams. And yeah, there are 5, at least 3, if not 5, really good teams in the AL East. The Orioles are a class above. No questions asked, gang. And I've talked this earlier, that one-game gap on the Yankees, I truly believe will be probably 5 by the All-Star break. 4 or 5. I could see them being up 4 games on the Yankees at the All-Star break, up 8.5 games at least on everybody else, up like 15 games on whoever's at the bottom, whether it be Toronto or maybe Boston or Tampa slides. Like, that's what I think we're looking at the All-Star break, gang. And that's with somewhat of a murderer's row schedule coming up. However, maybe that schedule is not as murderous row as we thought coming into the season. And we'll touch on that. I do have a nice little stat, though, since the Orioles were leading the division on May 1st. 51% of division leaders on May 1st since 1996 have gone on to win that division. So the Orioles, just statistically, have a better than 500 chance at winning the division at this point, historically. And that's if you don't take into account just how good and talented this team is. And I believe how much better this team is than all the rest of them out there. And it's because of the great players. And we're going to touch on some of these. But the MVP so far for the Orioles and the guy who won April Player of the Month for the American League, your reigning AL Rookie of the Year, Gunnar Henderson. Right up there in MVP conversation. Probably him, Soto, and frankly, it might have been Trout, but Trout's now injured, so drop him off. He's up there. Top 2, maybe top 3 if you want to find another guy in the AL that you think is deserving, Bobby Witt Jr. or something along those lines. But Gunnar Henderson is absolutely crushing the baseball, playing a fantastic defense, really coming into his own at such a young age. And I have a stat that Gunnar Henderson's the first player ever, 22 years or younger, to have 10-plus home runs before May. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, gang. Gunnar Henderson is that dude. And it's amazing to see because we've been told about it throughout his whole prospect run. This kid's special. This kid's special. And you hear that a lot get thrown around. But to see him come up, and just like a lot of these young kids did, he struggled for a little bit. Struggled maybe towards the back end of the season when he came up 2 years ago. Struggled for the first 2 months of last season. Wasn't looking completely overmatched, but wasn't looking great. Now, he's one of the best young players in baseball. And maybe even excelling past our expectations for him. He's our leadoff hitter, which is special because he has the power that he should be hitting in the middle of that lineup, but he has the speed that he can take advantage at the top of that lineup of a base knock and is a great guy to have up there. I just love it. I love Gunnar Henderson. He's been fantastic this season. And you know, like everybody, some tough stretches will occur throughout the year. But truly, he's been an MVP for these Orioles. And the Orioles kind of have a lot of them right now. You can look even at Adley Rutschman. Just had his 11-game hit streak snapped in the last game, or 2 games ago. Came back, started it up again. Or maybe it was a few games ago. Again, I've been planning this episode for 2 weeks. So throughout it, sometimes maybe I get jumbled up here and there. But Adley has just been fantastic. One of the best hitters in baseball this season. And truly another guy who could wind up getting himself in that MVP talk. Not necessarily because of outlandish numbers like maybe Gunnar Henderson's home run totals will be or stolen bases will wind up being. But just in the overall, because Adley's doing it all, man. And also playing a fantastic defense. The team's doing great. And it's because of these guys. Adley, Gunnar. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to see, gang. Absolutely love it. So Gunnar Henderson, like I said, was AL Player of the Month in April. First player ever, 22 years or younger, to have 10 home runs before May begins. It's great. It's great to see. Another really fun and great thing to see is Kyle Bradish and John Means officially coming back. It's big news. Again, these are the type of things that I was itching and killing myself for not being able to come on and talk to you guys about. But both looked great in their first start. They each had a start. Now, Kyle Bradish only got through 4 2/3. So you're like, That didn't look great, but it was a wacky first inning. It looked like it was going to be 1-2-3, and then there was, I believe, a catcher's interference, and then a hit batter, and it kind of got extended on him. And he was able to work himself out of all of it, but he just used, I believe, like 30, 35 pitches, something along those lines. So he wasn't in for a long day. But had that inning just ended normally, he would have easily gone through 5, if not potentially even 6, or at least gone into the 6th. So Bradish looked great, by the way. His stuff looked like last year's Kyle Bradish. And they didn't want to push his pitches or anything. I think he left at about 80 pitches, which is fine. I don't need you to push him through. Again, we got the win, and it was just a great thing, especially coming back for that final game of the New York series, them trying to split it, us trying to take 3 of 4 and get that division lead, and that's what happened. Kyle Bradish is great to slot into that rotation again at the top, and even more so when we talk about the injury that's to come. But giving us that 1-2 punch that's so important in a rotation. We know Corbin Burnes has been rock solid for us. Grayson Rodriguez has been rock solid for us, despite the fact that, and we'll get into it, he got injured and still unsure completely, but we'll talk a little about it. I have good feelings. I have a good sense of it. So we'll see. But adding Bradish to Corbin Burnes is phenomenal, man. Once we hopefully get back GrayRod, that 1-2-3 is most likely the best 1-2-3 rotation in Major League Baseball. And frankly, all of the other guys have been pitching so great recently. It's hard not to get excited, and because this is something, again, we talked about even in the offseason, that this rotation, when it all came together, could very well be the best rotation in Major League Baseball. And when everybody was telling me, oh, we need a starter, even after Corbin Burnes, oh, you're going to need a starter. Oh, you need to make a trade. You need to add to the rotation. I would say where? Where do you want to improve? Because, yeah, okay, maybe we could improve, but I have great belief in all of these starters for the Orioles. And we'll touch on this, okay? John Means, though, came back, I believe, pitched 7 scoreless against Cincinnati. Also looked great. And that's something I'm more surprised about than seeing Kyle Bradish come back excellent. And it's just a great thing. If John Means gets back to that 3 years ago John Means, where he was in Cy Young contention, gang, this is what we talked about. This is the specialness of this team, and specifically of this rotation, that nobody was appreciating coming into the year. Or hardly anyone was appreciating. That I was here screaming that you could have 2, 3, 4 guys towards the top of the Cy Young voting when it's all said and done. In top 10 of Cy Young voting when it's all said and done. Gang, this is what we're talking about. So hopefully it continues. Hopefully we continue to see great things from both of them and they remain healthy. Because overall, that's going to be the best thing for this team, is for all of these guys, all this talent, to remain healthy. And that kind of brings us into our next topic that we touched on a second ago. Grayson Rodriguez was not able to at least make the full season without getting nicked up with an injury. Now, it's just some shoulder inflammation. Certainly raises some red flags. Certainly isn't the worst thing to hear. Not exactly sure. They've been pretty hush-hush about it since it happened. You know, he went to the IL, out at least 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens. I haven't heard any real negative news on it. I think it was more precautionary, if anything. Also, you know, maybe, listen, playing a little chess, not checkers, right? So let's look at it this way. Grayson Rodriguez came out this season very strong, looking great. leading the Orioles in strikeouts. I believe possibly leading them. Nah, I don't think it was in ERA also, but up there with an ERA in the threes, mid to lower threes. Like, Grayson looked great, okay? But you don't want to burn him out. You're in a position with this whole roster where you have both Bradish and Means coming right back at this time. You have the other guys in Kremer, Irvin, and Suarez looking great at the time. Tyler Wells is close to coming back, hopefully, in the next week or two. So you kind of have this roster crunch, and I was going to sit here and say maybe they should go with a 6-man rotation. I still think that might be possible in a week or two, but we know they've moved Suarez to the pen, so that opened up one spot. The other spot, listen, it could be as simple as GrayRod. I don't even think they made it up. I think if he was 1,000% healthy, they wouldn't have done this. But maybe they're just like, we see a little bit of inflammation in you. Why don't we just put you on the shelf for a couple weeks, take it easy. We don't want to eat up your innings right now. Allow the other guys to come back, see how they're pitching, see how the other bottom 2 or 3 guys in the rotation are pitching, kind of see what we have, and then we can bring you back. In, I don't know, 3 weeks, a month. Just buy that extra time so that when we get to September, when we get to October, we're not talking about how Grayson Rodriguez has pitched so many more innings than he ever has before. Guys, it's not a race to see how many innings you can get. Certainly, the best pitchers that are performing the best are going to pitch a lot of innings because they're not getting taken out of games. But if we just have you miss some starts, that's not showing that you're not very capable of going deep into games. Innings per start we can look at instead of total innings, in which case GrayRod did great this season. And I believe when he comes back, we'll continue doing great. So that's why I think there's some kind of roster manipulation here and there. And we see teams do this where guys go on the IL even though maybe they're not hurt. For all we know, Grayson could have easily stayed in the rotation and made his next start and shown zero effects of anything. Or maybe we don't burn him out. And maybe we be cautious because we're getting these guys back. And it's kind of coincidental that that's when it kind of happened. And frankly, Mike Elias and the front office would not come right out and say that, because I think MLB would fine them if they did that. But also, it's a little gamesmanship where, listen, we're not showing our hand. We're going to keep everything in-house. So I'm not that worried about GrayRod. I believe that at this point, it's already been, I want to say, a week, give or take, maybe less, maybe 5 days since the news. I feel like we would have had bad news break had that been the suspicion. I also feel like the reason we're not getting necessarily good news breaking on it is because, again, maybe it's more gamesmanship than anything and kind of long-term picture thinking with roster manipulation. And this is how we're going to allow GrayRod to be his best self later in the season as well, and not just early in the season, gang. So that's what I think. That's where my mind's at. That's kind of the feel I have on this Grayson Rodriguez news. When it hit, I was, so upset, gang. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, right when this rotation's about to get healthy, now it isn't again. But let's take a step back off of that emotional reaction and think maybe there's a bigger picture happening and there's bigger things at play. And maybe the injury isn't really an injury at all, and just an opportunity for them to buy him some time where they don't have to let him use his innings, where we don't have to try and grind him into the ground, and let Bradish and Means and maybe even Wells in a little come back and see what they have, while also seeing what Kremer and Irvin and even Suarez has. All I'm saying, guys, is I got a feeling it's a big picture thing more than the shoulder inflammation being an issue. And that's why we're not really hearing much news, because there isn't really any good or bad to report, because there really isn't much of anything going on with him other than just this gamesmanship and long picture chess. And I'm fine with it. Now, we talked about Tyler Wells. We mentioned him. He started playing catch at the beginning of May. No timetable set for his return yet. And frankly, the way the team stands, I don't see any way he doesn't come back in the bullpen, which could be a benefit. It could definitely be a benefit, and we'll touch more on that later in the episode. There's a topic that I think Tyler Wells is the answer to. If you've been listening to me for a while and since the beginning, you probably already know what I'm going to say what I think is going to happen and what I think is the best thing for the team. But we'll see. We'll see, gang. Either way, great to see Tyler Wells playing catch again, because I'm the president of the Man's Fan Club. One of my favorite Orioles. Stupidly, I guess, but possibly at least. I have huge hopes for Tyler Wells, and I see big things for him for this team and being a big piece in the home machine when it's all said and done. And we'll touch on that more later. While we're on the news of injuries, since we've been off air, Austin Hayes suffered a calf strain. It's funny, I kind of saw it in live time and instantly said, Heston Kjerstad's coming up. And that's exactly what happened. Hayes went down, Kjerstad came up. Now, since then, they've also brought up Ryan McKenna, who my infatuation with. I actually was shocked when McKenna didn't make the team out of camp. Now, part of that was because he was out of options. The Orioles were lucky enough, nobody claimed him, and they were able to send him to the minors. So now you can play kind of this back and forth game with Ryan McKenna all season without the risk, I believe, of losing him. So Heston has looked solid, okay? Neither of them have gotten a lot of playing time, truthfully. There isn't a lot of playing time to go around, and certainly when you're Heston Kjerstad and Mountcastle has been performing so well, and O'Hearn has been performing so well, and Santander's really starting to heat up a little and get back into it, and Colin Cowser played so well. There are less opportunities. Well, another reason there was less opportunities since he's come up is because the Orioles have faced a lot of left-handers. In fact, an insane amount of left-handers. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but that's not where he's going to be best suited, right? Obviously, a left-handed slugger, you'd rather not keep the left-hander in. And if you are, it's going to be probably a Colton Cowser, who showed early how well he was hitting against righties and lefties, and also showed that this spring. Heston also showed that ability to hit off of lefties, but Heston hasn't shown his full potential since he's been up. He's gotten some singles, no extra base hits, I believe, definitely no home runs. Again, very, very small periods of time, but he doesn't look overwhelmed. He doesn't look overmatched. He still looks like he's trying to figure it out, which you would expect. Not only does he not have much major league experience, but he really, again, doesn't have a ton of professional baseball experience. Remember, he had like those 2 years off. And so last year, I believe, was his first full season back. I think he came back for a short period the season before at the very end, if I remember. But again, this is a kid that is still figuring out professional baseball. Just played so amazing during the spring and during the minors this past 2 years that we're like, hey, let's bring him up and see what he's doing. I still am very encouraged by Heston Kjerstad. I just don't necessarily see where he fits on this year's team, gang. And that can be hard to hear because Orioles number 2 prospect and this big power hitter and unbelievable numbers in AAA, and you want him up, you want to see it, and I think he'll stay up for a little, but I believe when Austin Hayes comes back, he's the one that's going to go down and not Ryan McKenna. Maybe I'm off on that. Maybe I'm wrong. That's kind of what I think would probably be best for the team. And we saw Ryan McKenna, again, come up. Not a ton of opportunities. Already has, I believe, 2, if not 3 home runs. Ryan McKenna has been scorching the ball, plays a good defense, comes up with clutch moments. This is why I wanted Ryan McKenna on the team, gang. Like, I'm sure a lot of Birdland would disagree with me that they want Ryan McKenna on this team over a Heston Kjerstad. But frankly, gang, listen, moving forward next year, Heston absolutely, I believe, has a spot on this roster. This year, I just don't know where his spot on the roster is, assuming these guys stay healthy. And Ryan McKenna, I see having a spot, having that good spot. Now, obviously, opportunities will dip once you bring back, Austin Hayes. And heck, the Orioles could decide to move both of them down when Hazy comes back. That's a possibility. So we'll see where they go. We'll see what happens with that. But this is why I said I wanted Ryan McKenna on the team, because I wanted to see if he could keep last year going into this year and maybe even improve upon it and take that next step. And listen, short size, but he's shown he at least can keep up last year in the short term. And who knows, maybe he can take that next step or two. I think it's big time. And I think keeping the righty in it allows the Orioles to play kind of this mix and match game where you can take, not every time, but you can essentially take Hayes and McKenna, keep them in the lineup against lefties, and have Mullins and Cowser in the lineup against righties. It's possible. And again, I think just because Mullins, Cowser are such big pieces of this team, and you could even argue Hayes, such big pieces to this team, that maybe it won't be that evenly of a split. But I think you'd see that more and more if you have 5 outfielders, or 6 outfielders, including Santander, which I don't even know if you'd be able to hold. I honestly right now can't even think if that would be 5 or 6 outfielders. So I think it would be 5, right? Yeah, 5 outfielders, right? And you could keep 5 outfielders conceivably. So I see some benefit in that personally. I don't know if they'll go that route, but either way, I love seeing Heston and McKenna up to show what they're capable of and show what they can do. And both of them have looked like they can contribute to this team this year for sure. Now, Craig Kimbrel has had some ups and downs, gang. Okay? In fact, before we get to Craig Kimbrel, I skipped over probably like the biggest thing of the whole episode, like the biggest topic of the whole episode, the thing that people probably want to hear more than anything is me talking about Jackson Holliday getting sent down. So before we move to Craig Kimbrel, let's talk about Jackson Holliday. We know it did not go his way while he was up in the majors. And in our last episode, it was coming into, I believe, the Angels series, or it was at the end of the KC series, going into the Angels series. And I said, I'll give him Kansas City, I'll give him LA, and I will give him Oakland at home again. But if he can't get it together by then, got to move off him. Well, the Orioles decided to not even give him the Oakland series, which I can't remember how many lefties they faced in that series. I don't know if it was 1, 2, or even 3. Off the top of my mind, I can't remember. But I was kind of surprised because it's one of these things like, already, if you're saying you don't want his confidence to be shot, well, already then his confidence probably is a little shot, right? That's just human nature. That's not to say that's a huge negative or he can't rebound off of that. But yeah, at that point, his confidence was probably already shot, right? So why not give him a chance to perform against the Oakland Athletics when they're one of the worst teams in the league, despite how they've been scrappy and playing. They're one of the worst teams in the league, and see if he can get right against a really crappy team with some really bad pitching before the New York series or before you send him down. That's what I would have liked. That's what I would have done. At least give him that one more home series against the Oakland A's. The Orioles didn't do that. The Orioles said, let's cut the cord right now after LA. Let's just send him back down. And since he's been back down, he's continued to hit. I know he had a multi-hit game. I think he even went Yahtzee. He's been performing. He's been fine. And overall, This time next year, this will be a thing of the past, gang. Like, the only part that we'll remember is being like, remember when Jackson, like, couldn't get a hit? Because now he's torching the league. Now he's potentially AL Rookie of the Month, like Cowser just was, as we'll talk later. And I think that's where he'll be. Heck, I think that we might even get to a point in a couple weeks where he's back. And then he's performing properly. I don't think this is the worst thing. You can look at the list of great major league players who struggled early on. You're talking Cal. You're talking Griffey. Talking Mantle. And that's just a small part of the list. There's a lot more who struggled, okay? So let's not crush the kid. Let's not think that he's done. Let's not worry that we had too high of expectations for him. Maybe we did coming into day one, but I still argue, had he been there actually day one of the season, the spotlight would have been less on him, more on the whole team, more on new guys like Corbin Burns, more on returning guys like Adley and Gunnar. And then he probably would have performed a little better than the spotlight just being focused on him as soon as he came up. And he couldn't perform. And yeah, he looked overmatched, at least for the first half of his MLB stint. However, I truly think that he started having better at-bats. He started getting more walks. He started getting harder hit balls. I know he smoked a ball in Kansas City that was right at Adam Frazier. I know that the series before, back in Baltimore, he had one that he caught off the end of the bat, but just fell short of the right field wall and could have easily been an extra base hit, if not a home run. So, was it what we wanted? No. Was it what we expected? No. But maybe we should have expected that, gang. Maybe we should have expected some failure and understood that he's never failed at baseball at any point in his life. And that he's a quick study and smart and with it and has the right work ethic and attitude to move past this and get back to the minors and work on what you need to work on, what you now realize is important at the major league level. Because, listen, again, he didn't struggle at any point in his baseball life. At any level, he pretty much dominated after just a day or two. So, you don't know at that point when, all you're thinking is, everything I'm doing is right, so I'm going to keep doing what I am going to keep doing. It's working. And then you get to the majors and you're going, oh, I should have been working on X, or I should have been paying more attention to Y. And it was working for me before, but now it isn't because I didn't become an expert at X or Y or whatever it may be. So now you can go to the minors where you can work on those things and you focus on those things. And I think the Orioles probably told him that, hey, we don't need you to work on everything. We just want you to focus on these 2 to 3 things to improve on. And once you do that, kid, you're going to be a star. And that's what I think is going to happen. Whether it's this time next year or in a couple weeks, Jackson Holliday is going to be a star in the majors. It's only a matter of time, gang. So very excited to see eventually him come up and perform. And it stinks to be just didn't work the first time around. It happens, man. These Orioles have had damn near a perfect track record when it comes to this stuff. Somebody had to falter. But overall, he's going to have a fine major league career, if not an unbelievable Hall of Fame major league career. The tools are all there. The mental is all there. Everything is there. Personally, I wish that, he kind of got to the mindset of where he's like, let me just slap the ball on the ground, man. Put it into play. Just start putting it into play and good things happen. He has plus speed. Slap it into the ground. Find some holes. Make them get you out. And it didn't really seem like he did that, because I think that then he could have taken that next step and looked for the power at times too, because then guys would be giving him more opportunities because they would be focusing on, hey, he's probably just going to slap the ball. So let me put the ball here. Let me give him this pitch instead. And then he could sit on it and really display that power and extra base prowess. It is what it is, gang. It is what it is. And ultimately, it all comes down to this. This is a championship roster. This is a team that's going to win the American League and potentially the World Series this year. And we can't afford to let you go through all the growing pains in the world to get there. Right? Like, let's go. We're about to play the Nationals. C.J. Abrams has been looking great this year. Their shortstop that they got from San Diego in that Soto deal. But for the first 2 years that he was in Washington, didn't exactly look pretty. At times it looked ugly. At times you saw the promise and you were like, okay, I think this is going to wind up becoming something. But the Nationals stunk. So they were like, we can just let him go out there and fail at the major league level and figure it out here because it's not costing us anything. The Orioles are in a position where they are win now. And yeah, we're set up to win in 2, 5, 10, 20 years also. But we're here to win this year, gang. And unfortunately, Jackson Holliday could not help us win in this early stretch of his career. Even though the one game he got an RBI that did help us win. In fact, I think both games he got an RBI helped us win. Neither here or there. Jackson Holliday, it stinks. It's not what we wanted. But he's going to be fine. And like I said, this time next year, not only will he be a mainstay in the Orioles lineup, he's probably going to be one of their stars. He's probably going to be at the top of Rookie of the Year voting. He's probably going to be coming off of Rookie of the Month. And nobody's going to be thinking about that tough stretch that he had at the plate early this year. I swear. And again, it might be in a couple weeks. That's how talented he is. The Orioles literally might bring him back up in a couple weeks, and he may never go back down. He may show us exactly what we expect in a few weeks. Don't be shocked. All right. So now let's get to the curious case of Craig Kimbrel. I don't know, gang. In fact, I do know. This is what we should expect out of Craig Kimbrel. The ups, the downs, the highs, the lows. The days where he goes 1, 2, 3. Back to back to back to back appearances. 1, 2, 3. Nobody even can get on against him. Striking out 2 guys an inning. And then there's the appearances like we saw against Oakland where walking everybody. Just, hey, here, you have a base, you have a base, you have a base. Before you know it, base is loaded or the game's blown or the other team wins. Saw that in Cincinnati, too. Out of nowhere, he gets himself into a bases-loaded jam with 1 out. We have to bring Cano in. Luckily for us, we hold on to that 2-1 win. And they can't tie it. The Reds can't tie it. Because Cano came in and shut the door. But if Craig stays in the game right there, we probably lose that game on the next batter. So, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because we have a guy that we know has had great success in his career. Now I believe 6th on the all-time save lead. I know when we were in Kansas City, he got tied 7th, I believe, or maybe that was 8th, and now he's 7th. Neither here or there. It was that moment where Cowser tossed the last ball, or as he said, yeeted the last ball into the fountain behind him, and they had to go digging it out. And then the next day, he yeeted a ball into the fountain with his bat, which was beautiful to see. Listen, I've told you that I'm from the Philly area. And when we signed Kimbrel, all these Phillies fans were like, oh, be careful. Oh, watch out. Oh, that's not going to be good. And I said, I think he'll be pretty good for us during the regular season. But that we'll probably need to bring in a different closer. Or promote one of our other arms to being a closer. And I still think that that's the case, gang. I think that the Orioles right now are going to go to more of this kind of, I don't know, carte blanche situation where some days maybe Kimbrel does have the save. Other days, I don't know, maybe it's going to be Cano, or maybe it's going to be Webb like we saw the one time, or maybe it's going to be Tyler Wells when he comes back, or heck, maybe Albert Suarez out of nowhere becomes our closer this season. And maybe it's just going to be a combination of everything, and we're just going to mix and match, and Brandon Hyde's just going to feel out the situation with the team and the lineup and the righty versus lefty and whatever it may be. I don't know. Danny Colomb is another great option. And the nice part is we have lefties that certainly have been performing well. Cionel Perez, who we were going to talk next, is back from his injury and has been looking good. Keegan Aiken is looking amazing so far this season. And Danny Colomb is also looking amazing. So the idea of one of those lefties, preferably Danny, taking that closer spot, while I don't love my best lefty being the closer, I don't hate it in the sense of, hey, I trust these 2, even 3 guys at some point that are lefties, right? Because between Irvin and even John Means, one of them, probably Irvin, might find himself in the bullpen. So then that's 4 lefties in the pen. That doesn't really add up unless one of them's the closer. So I think Danny Colomb has a chance at being that guy. I think they want to ideally keep Cano into that high leverage 7th, 8th inning situation, but I wouldn't be shocked the more experience he winds up getting closing out these games, the more and more the Orioles trust him in that spot. I also, like I said, Albert Suarez now in the bullpen has a lot of intrigue when it comes to being a closer. And I don't know if I trust him and his stuff yet in there. But right along the coattails of Cano, right? Cano has the balls move so much and such a movement on his pitches that sometimes it's hard to locate. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like the Orioles would be hesitant making him the full-time closer. Well, Suarez to me is kind of the exact same thing. Hell, Cole Irvin kind of is the same thing too, just from the left side. But Suarez to me can almost potentially take Cano's place as that 7th, 8th inning back-end leverage guy, righty. And Cano might be able to jump into the closer role. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. And personally, the thing that I think most could be possible is Tyler Wells coming back and being that closer. Personally, when Batista went down last year, I felt Tyler Wells was the best option for us in the 9th inning. And frankly, the way that they managed the bullpen in the playoffs, it looked as though they had the plan of Tyler Wells being the closer in the playoffs last year, had it ever gone to a save situation. That wasn't the case. That doesn't mean that this year won't be the case because, frankly, look at the rotation. There is no way that you can stick Tyler Wells back in the rotation when he gets back this year. Probably in a couple weeks. So, but Tyler Wells has great stuff, is a huge, big mountain of a man, and really, really has good stuff, especially if you're only seeing him 1 inning in that 9th. I think Tyler Wells could be the key to us solving our closer problems. And maybe, at the end of the day, maybe we just go with Kimbrel and call it what it is. But just like Jackson Holliday, I really feel like this team is so win now and so ready to take that next step that we got to have a more trustworthy option once the season starts progressing. It's fine in April and May. August, September, October, it's not nearly as fine. And that's where we might wind up going out and making a move for a closer, which is definitely possible. Usually there's at least a few closers on the market each trade deadline, and you don't need to give up an insane amount for them. So that's the type of guy that I think the Orioles could decide to go out and make the move for. Anytime I talk about the moves, that's the one spot that I say that absolutely makes the most sense as the move that should and most likely will be made at some point. Craig Kimbrel, man, what can you do? If only we had Batista available, guys. If only Felix was healthy. And hopefully, pray in next year he comes back healthy and stays that way for a very long time in his career. Because he's an X factor. He's a serious, serious X factor. All right. So the next thing up is the Cowser and Westberg bromance. Now, we saw some of this in Kansas City. We've seen it in Boston. We saw it all over, man. These two kids are playing amazing. Now, Cowser, like we mentioned earlier, won AL Rookie of the Month in April, just like Gunnar won AL Player of the Month in April. Tremendous time to be an Orioles fan, man. Now, Cowser, we have seen cool off a little. He still is putting together nice at-bats, playing good defense. Every now and then he has a wacky moment out there and left. It seems a little goofy sometimes, but overall he does play a very nice defense, and he can play both left, center, and right, which is a big benefit to have for this team and the flexibility. Now, unfortunately, his bat has kind of gone cold, I would say. But a product of that is, just like we talked about the lack of opportunities for Heston, is just how many lefties he's been facing. And because Hayes has been injured, they haven't really been able to sit him against those lefties. So at least until McKenna came up recently. So that was one of the reasons that truly, even though he's shown the ability to be able to hit lefties, he's just been facing a lot of them. And normally you would probably have him sitting more of those days than at least he did without Hayes. So Cowser, I still have all the expectations in the world, has shown us just how special he is. And Westberg has been just as special, but more consistent, right? Cowser's been a little up and down and up and down and up and down, whereas Westberg just stays steady, man. It's unbelievable. I've been hearing the J.J. Hardy comparisons, and I really do enjoy those. I think he has more power than Hardy. I think he's a better contact hitter than Hardy. He might even be better defensively than Hardy. I think he's J.J. Hardy plus. I'm pretty sure he's a bigger guy than Hardy, too. I love the two of them. They have this bromance. They talk about like this yin and yang. Cowser's kind of the goofy. Westberg's kind of the serious, but they bring out the other one in each other also. It's a great thing to see, gang. And Westberg is a player coming into the year I talked about being one of the biggest X factors. Because, yes, we expected Gunnar and Adley to do great. We expected the veterans like Mountie and O'Hearn and Santander to do really well. Mullins to do well. But Westberg is a guy that I said kind of gets lost in the weeds sometimes. And Westberg is as solid as it comes, man. Seems like he has that clutch factor to him. I love Westberg and Cowser right side by side a lot of days in the lineup. It's a beautiful thing. It's a great bromance, and it's a great thing to have. And we know my love for the cow suits and everything. In fact, I promise next time Cowser gets hot, and next game Cowser, a huge Cowser game, I'm going to show up in a cow suit. I have it in the closet. I almost wore it today, but had some serious stuff to talk about, and I felt like this wasn't the right time. Just because it's taken, Cowser, like I said, has gotten a little cold a little. But I'm not worried. I'm fine. In fact, I think bringing back Austin Hayes soon will hopefully take off some of that pressure from Cowser hitting against lefties all the time and stuff, and allow him to continue to elevate that game and move forward. And I'll make one last point for Cowser facing all the lefties. We talked about with Gunnar Henderson how he's just started to feel comfortable hitting major league lefties. Now, we saw Cowser have success against it, just like we saw Gunnar have some success. But to make that consistent is tough. And we've seen Gunnar can start being consistent against lefties. But again, we heard him just talk about how it takes a while. Well, Cowser's behind him in time. Heston's behind him in time. It's going to take those guys a little time to really feel fully comfortable against major league lefties. cows are more than Heston, I'm sure. Or cows are quicker than Heston, I'm sure. Because we've already seen how dominant he can be. When he gets hot, he's hot. All right. So that's kind of digging into the individual players. Obviously, there's guys that we could highlight. Cedric Mullins, we didn't really talk about. He's been great. Santander starting to heat up. That's been a great thing. But let's kind of focus more on the broad scale of the different parts of this team. The rotation and bullpen have both been unbelievably great for this team this season. And coming into the year, everyone talked about, offense this, offense that. You don't have the pitching. You just don't have the pitching. And I was the opposite. I was saying, I don't see how you don't think we have the pitching. And since then, we've added even another name or two, like Albert Suarez, who's come into the mix, and you're like, oh my God, they've got even more pitching than I thought. Keegan Aiken, one of the best lefties in baseball this year. Well, these were guys that people weren't even expecting to make the team, and Suarez didn't make the team out of camp, let alone be X factors and one of the best relievers in baseball. So rotation and bullpen have been absolutely fantastic. We have the second best whip in baseball, walks, hit, inning, pitch. So we are just not allowing base runners to get on, and you see that from both the rotation and the bullpen. Opponents have the sixth worst batting average against us. And the Orioles are issuing the least amount of walks. It's beautiful, gang. And those final two, when you combine them, create that first one, the walks, hit, inning, pitch, essentially. And we're doing everything we need to. Seems like Drew French and Chris Holt, these pitching coach and director of pitching, have really just found ways to make great players even greater. Improve upon these things. Seeing where guys are struggling and where guys don't excel and what pitches get hit, like four-seam fastballs, and not only making them throw two-seam fastballs, but those two-seamers now becoming top-notch pitches for them, along with a wider range of breaking balls and off-speed balls for almost all of these guys. It's very, very, very exciting, and I think that the Orioles' rotation and bullpen is maybe the most undervalued part of a team in all of baseball. The Orioles' pitching, people don't give credit to like they should. I don't know why. I don't know. Frankly, I feel truly if Felix Bautista was the closer, everybody would be talking about how great the Orioles' pitching is. And the fact that we don't have that one guy, which, yes, has bit us in the ass a couple times, has hurt us, but is certainly a spot that we can improve upon, whether it's with the guy we have now improving, whether it's in-house options to take that spot, or going out and making a trade for a better option. It's a great thing. Now, as far as the offense goes, we have the sixth best batting average, first in home runs, 3 home runs over second place, 10 home runs over third place. So absolutely mashing baseballs this year. Hitting home runs at almost an unprecedented level. Third most RBIs, second best in slugging, second best in OPS. I mean, these are just key numbers. These are how teams get runs. And we are at the top in almost all of them, gang. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. The Orioles as a whole have 14 wins versus teams over 500, the most out of anybody. And that, again, just goes to show you how that first 36, or at this point 34 games, wasn't as easy as it looked coming into the year. And the Orioles performed just as great as we hoped and expected they would in those first 36. Absolutely dominating. 12-7 at home, 11-4 on the road. The team can't be stopped no matter where they are. I absolutely love it. Now, I want to dig into the schedule. One of the last things we're going to do. And like I said, that first 36, I kind of already broke down the first 36, middle 99, final 27. But as far as the opponents go, and really the consecutive days played, we're coming into a very tough stretch. So we have Washington for 2 games coming up tonight. And Again, Washington hasn't been that bad this season. Certainly been a tough team to play. Arizona, who was in the World Series last year, we have for 3 at home. They're not playing good baseball at all. They're not looking like the team they were last year, but there's a ton of talent on that roster. So it's just one of these things when are they going to start waking up? And hopefully it's not till after we're done playing them. But again, that's a team that coming into the season we were like, oh, this is very dangerous. Now, maybe not so much. Toronto, stinking at the moment, bottom of the AL East. I believe we're 6.5, 7.5 games above them at the moment. Seattle, 3 at home. And Seattle has been solid. In fact, they're the only team above 500, I believe, in this stretch of games that I'm about to talk about. So Seattle is the toughest of all of these opponents coming in. And even them haven't been playing their best baseball, really haven't looked great. And we get them at home, which is nice, okay? Now, that Seattle series starts 13 straight consecutive days for these Orioles. And we'll touch on that more, but that's when the schedule as far as amount of games and amount of days really is tough, okay? Or really starts getting tough. So after Seattle, we got 3 against St. Louis in St. Louis. St. Louis has stunk this season. 4 against the White Sox in Chicago. They've been the worst team in baseball so far. I think, only have 8 wins so far on the year. Again, we have 23. Then you got, and so in that stretch, Seattle's the only team, I believe, that has a winning record at this point. So that looked tough. Again, I said first 36, and it ended at that Washington series. So I thought the start of the toughness was Arizona. And the fact that Arizona, Toronto, St. Louis, and Chicago are all not very good, and Seattle is the best out of that group of those series, and even they haven't been that good, it gives me hope that the Orioles could really start that middle 99 in great fashion. I mean, how many games is it? Let's start after the Washington 2 games, because that ends the 36. So then 3, 6, 9, 12, 16. That takes us through Chicago before Boston, right? Let's include Boston for 19, okay? So 19 games. The Orioles go 13-6. I mean, that's not crazy against those teams. And again, that's pegging you about winning 2 of every 3. But against that row of teams, I don't see how they're not at least 10-9, 11-8, 12-7. So then it just starts going, how far? How far is that gap going to be? And it could be big. Could be real big. All right. So let's talk about these consecutive days played that's coming up, okay? So we still have about a week or so until it starts. We have the 2 games against Washington, 3 games against Arizona, 3 games against Toronto, okay? Now, essentially all of them are home. We know Washington is right around the corner, and Arizona, Toronto are both home, okay? So it starts all of this starts with a nice home stand to get rested, because even the Washington games, these guys might be sleeping at their homes. Like, there's no reason to get a team hotel, and even if they are, probably families coming out. Like, you feel more at home because you're right around the corner, right? So after that Toronto series, we finish out the homestand with 3 games against Seattle. Like I said, that starts the stretch of 13 straight days without a break. 3 against Seattle, 3 in St. Louis, 4 in Chicago. We come back home to finish it off, 3 against Boston, right? So that's 4 straight series, 13 straight games that we played. After a single off day, headed into June, we start with 17 straight days. So 3 at home against Tampa. Then we go to Toronto for 3, to Tampa for 4, back home for Atlanta, Philly, to New York to face the Yankees. Excuse me. The 17 is Tampa, Toronto, Tampa, Atlanta, and Philly. 17 straight days. Then we have a single day off, and then we go into 13 straight again in New York against the Yankees, in Houston against the Astros, at home for Cleveland, at home for Texas. And that'll take us to July. That'll take us right into July. So pretty much in a week, the Orioles are going to play 13 straight, 17 straight, and 13 straight. It is a tough stretch, gang. And that even more to the case that if these next few series, the 3 that we have, Washington, Arizona, and Toronto, and then the 4 that we have during that first 13 straight game stretch, if they can perform well against those teams, I mean, there's no stopping these Orioles. Maybe we go into a little tough stretch there. But then after that, we play through the All-Star break without really a long stretch of games without a break. Then we end August on 13 straight days we end July on 13 straight days going into August. And then towards the end of August, we have another 13 straight days. That's it. So this box that I'm looking at in the next month and a half really is the toughest stretch, not just with some opponents, but also with amount of games in days played for these Orioles. And I believe they're going to excel through that. And really excel through the whole season, gang. And listen, that's just where we stand right now. The Orioles have laid the groundwork for a historical season. At the very least, a great season. At the very least, a season that allows you the opportunity to go and win the American League pennant and the World Series, which is where we want to be, which is where we're going to be. I love it, gang. Now, to wrap up this episode, the Orioles announced they're adding 2 guys to the Orioles Hall of Fame, Terry Crowley and my guy, Nick Markakis. Thrilled for number 21. We've talked multiple times about Nick Markakis on this episode, or not on this episode, just throughout this podcast. And I've talked about how he's one of my all-time favorite Orioles, how he was my guy, how the number 21 jersey that I have, despite it being a Jimmy Key jersey, has always meant more as a Nick Markakis jersey to me than it has a Jimmy Key or now Austin Hayes or whoever else may have worn it. So Nick Markakis, I'm thrilled, gets that honor. And we've also talked about how, you know, he had a rocky ending and it kind of parting ways in an ugly way somewhat with the Orioles, and how we hope that they would kind of reach out and create some good blood between the two sides again and kind of bring Nicky Markakis back into the fold and into Birdland. And this is one of those things that makes that happen. So it makes me very happy to see, makes me proud to announce. I'm going to try and be there. I know it's not till August, so I'm going to try and go. I love Nick Markakis. So Nicky Markakis is my guy. Very happy, very proud to see that the Orioles are going to honor him, put him into their Hall of Fame, and yeah, good stuff, gang. Good stuff. Great stuff. So happy I was able to finally get in front of the camera again with the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Have another episode. Episode 22, the Jim Palmer of episodes. Either way, gang, I appreciate you sticking with me. I appreciate you understanding that life kind of got in my way a little bit and that I was mourning the loss of my dog and understanding that sometimes real life happens. Sometimes we need a break and we step back. But don't think for a second that every single day I didn't want to come on and talk to you, gang, and didn't try multiple times. Literally, this episode changed multiple times because I would keep writing it out and then I just wouldn't be able to do it, and I would wind up having to rewrite the episode because more games happened and more stuff happened. And I'm really glad we touched on a lot of stuff, gang. This was a very broad-scale episode, and I'm excited to get back tomorrow, hopefully, and talk about the beginning of this series in more of a individual game and inspecting it closely. But at the end of the day, I'm thrilled to have been back, gang. I'm thrilled to be back. We're going to keep pumping these out. We're going to not have a 2-week break again. I promise you that. We're not even going to have a week break. Hopefully, we don't have more than a day or 2 break at any point the rest of this season. I love being here. I love talking with you guys. And I love these Orioles, man. They've done great things. And again, it's unbelievable to think that we're about to end the first 36 games of the season. It's flying by, gang, but don't think that I don't live, eat, sleep, and breathe these Orioles, even when I'm not coming on talking to you folks about it. But I will be many times moving forward. All right, gang. With that, I'm going to call it a wrap. I'm going to put a plug in this one. And it was a fantastic episode. Very happy about it. Thrilled that we're back. And we're going to keep going. All right, gang? So, with that being said, this was another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go!
Talk